Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Alright, it's time to talk about Kai. So, obviously everybody knows Kai is Onision's husband, um, and due to all this Onision scandal, Kai has been coming up more and more among victims and other people who have noticed certain patterns of behavior. So, let's talk about Kai. So you guys know how in my last Onision video I kept saying I'm not a psychologist? Well, guess who is a psychologist? Kai. Now, I find this interesting that Kai is a psychologist and Greg is clearly very sick. Now, when I say Kai is a psychologist, Kai doesn't work as a psychologist. I don't think Kai is like certified to practice psychology in terms of like, you know, as a profession. It is cat time again. However, Kai was in school studying psychology when he met Onision. And apparently this was in New Mexico, and Onision actually moved to New Mexico to live near Kai while he was finishing school. And this is interesting because usually he, you know, like transports his partners, girlfriends, etc., like to Washington to be with him. With the exception of Shiloh, I guess he went to her in that case. So sometimes he does that. And yeah, so he stayed with Kai while he finished school for psychology, apparently. This is what I read on the internet. Now, the reason I find that interesting is because, you know how I say Onision reminded me of someone that I used to know who was also like a narcissistic personality type, who didn't have any empathy and didn't understand why the things that he did were wrong. Kai also is starting to remind me of somebody that I knew that I also believe had very severe ethical, moral problems. So several years ago, I was friends with this person on the internet who lived in another country, and she was going to school also for psychology at the time that we were friends. And we were really close. I told her a lot of personal details about my life. Fortunately, she didn't tell everybody on the internet like the other person did, but she was not a trustworthy person to have told those things to, because she was actually using them to manipulate and basically gaslight me. I really don't like how loosely people throw around the term gaslighting these days. But what she was doing was actually the textbook definition of gaslighting, which was intentionally trying to make me doubt my perception by fabricating like an alternate reality scenario and insisting that it was true. I'm not going to get into the details of it, but I believe that part of the reason she was so successful at manipulating people was because she was in school for psychology. And I think that sometimes when we think of someone who has studied psychology and is like in school to be a psychologist, we think of them as a good person who's going to go out there and help people, but that's not always the case. Sometimes people can study psychology and then use it, you know, to be manipulative. And that's what I learned during that entire friendship, is that just because someone knows psychology on an official level doesn't mean that you can trust them and that they have your best interests at heart, because understanding psychology is not the same as having empathy. Just because someone understands your feelings does not mean that they care about them. So putting this into context with Kai. So Kai has studied psychology in school. I believe that he graduated and has a degree in psychology. Obviously being Greg's partner for so long, I just find that very interesting, because we all kind of wonder, I'm sure, like how they stayed together for so long. Why are they still together? Why does Kai put up with this when Greg is clearly abusive and is most likely abusing Kai? And I believe the answer is that Kai is probably one of the few people that is qualified to deal with Onision in a relationship. I don't think it's a healthy relationship. I think it's very codependent, and it's a little disturbed, but I can see why it functions, knowing that Greg's partner actually psychologically understands Greg probably better than a lot of other partners that he's had. Now, I wouldn't say that I think Kai completely understands Greg or that Greg has like any power in the relationship necessarily, but I do think that that is a component. So Kai was a massive fan of Greg. Kai liked Kai put Greg on a pedestal like higher than anybody else has ever put him on, I believe. And this has been brought up before that Kai was like a super fan. So I believe that during the time that Kai was a fan of Onision and watching his content and following him and all that stuff, Kai was not fooled necessarily like everyone else, but really genuinely saw what was going on and still was a fan of him, which is weird, but that's really the only explanation that I have for why Kai would not get the hell out of Dodge at that point. So it's very possible that Kai knew exactly what he was getting himself into at the time, and that Onision was an interesting subject to Kai just as he was. So you can so if you want to know the entire history of like Kai and Onision's relationship, you can go read about it, and it's not really that interesting on its own. It's just that there are certain pieces to it that make it kind of interesting, such as Kai having studied psychology and being able to deal with Greg better than anyone else seems to be able to, and tolerate him better than anyone else. However, there are still a lot of signs that Greg is abusive towards Kai, but Kai just tolerates it. For example, they always have their Twitter fights, and they say that these were for getting these were for riling things up and to make drama so that they could get more attention, basically. But according to some of the Chris Hansen interviews, they mentioned these Twitter fights, and they weren't apparently fake, according to the person who brought them up. So it makes one wonder if they were actually faking those Twitter fights, or if they were just trying to save face afterwards, basically. Because if they weren't faking them, they are very clearly pretty manipulative, and yet Kai continues to tolerate this. Now, currently, it seems to be the theory with the Chris Hansen interviews that Onision is wanting to bring in younger girls into the relationship and is using Kai to do that by having Kai kind of bait them into a relationship with them, and then once they agree to that and then go to the house, then Onision also gets into a relationship with them. The things that I'm not clear on is how far Kai is involved with this, and how much of it is Kai's will versus Onision's, because on the surface it kind of looks like Onision is intentionally trying to make Kai's girlfriends cheat on him to hurt Kai's feelings or something like that. Who knows? But if you think about it, that doesn't really make sense, because while I don't think Onision is capable of feeling love, and apparently Kai actually said "I love you" to Onision way before Onision ever returned to the sentiment, which doesn't surprise me. So it's not that I think that Greg necessarily actually loves Kai as much as I think that Kai is still the most important person to Greg, because Kai is so much more capable of dealing with Greg and navigating Greg than most other people. So I don't necessarily think that Greg is trying to push Kai away, so I don't see why he would intentionally manipulate people to cheat on Kai with him. It doesn't really get him anything. There's no gain there. And I feel like people with his particular disorders don't do things that don't benefit him. So it kind of makes me wonder if Kai is sort of in on it and is using this as a tactic to manipulate the people that they bring into their lives by making them feel guilty for having been a homewrecker, for example, as people have expressed being. Because doing so, making someone feel guilty for something that they didn't actually do, is a way to control people, because when someone feels indebted to you, they're more likely to give in to your demands, which has been the case in many situations, such as Sarah making a video about how nothing happened and everything was totally illegal when it obviously wasn't. Sarah didn't do that of her own free will. She did it because she was coerced into doing it, and when you make someone think they did something wrong, it's much easier to coerce them. Because they feel you've got some dirt on them or something, they owe you. So that's kind of, I'm not saying that's what the case is, I'm just saying that that's kind of what it looks like to me, because there's no other reason I can think of why Greg would just intentionally trick people into cheating on Kai. Like, what would he stand to gain? Besides being able to have sex with him, but he would also be able to do that apparently without, you know, without tricking them. So that is one possibility. It's also, I guess, possible that he is just cheating on Kai with Kai's girlfriends, and doesn't care or understand that it hurts Kai's feelings. But I feel like that being the case, it would be weird for Kai to continue to stay with him throughout all of that happening over and over again. I do believe that Kai was victimized by Greg to some capacity. I think that a lot of things were normalized to Kai that should not have been normalized, such as obviously having relationships with minors, and the manipulation and abuse tactics that Greg has employed, both on Kai and on other people around Kai. So I think these things have been normalized. So in that sense, Kai could be considered a victim, but the problem is that Kai had so many opportunities to not put himself in that situation where this was happening to him. For example, Kai's parents really did not want him to be in a relationship with Greg, and Greg has expressed like a severe dislike for Kai's parents, specifically Kai's mother. Apparently Kai's mother, really doesn't like Greg. So Greg was trying to emotionally blackmail Kai into not speaking to his mother anymore because he feels that if you talk to anybody who doesn't like him, then you're a bad person, and even if that person is literally your own family members, and that you should just put your spouse above literally every other person ever, which is not true. You should definitely, when you are in a marriage, it is a good idea to deal with your spouse more than your mother. Like, you don't want to be calling your mother all the time and taking your mother's advice all the time over your spouse. Like, that is true. But you shouldn't have to cut off contact entirely with your mother because they don't like your spouse. Like, that is a ridiculous demand. So anyway, Kai's mother did not like Greg, and Kai's parents tried to convince him not to be in a relationship with Greg, not to get married to Greg, etc., and Kai did it anyway. Additionally, because Kai should have some knowledge of psychology, Kai should understand the impact that a lot of these things have on the younger people that they're involving in the situation. Because that would be something that you would study when you're in school for psychology. The trauma that happens when you're younger has a big part to play in the disorders that you develop as you get older. So there's no way that Kai could have gotten through school and gotten a degree in psychology without knowing that certain things that young people go through would have a bad impact on them. So I don't really buy it that Kai is just an innocent victim and didn't know anything, didn't know any better, and it's all just been Greg manipulating Kai. I think to the same extent that Greg manipulates Kai, Kai manipulates Greg, which I don't feel bad about. Like, don't get me wrong, like, they can both just manipulate each other all they want. I really don't care. But it becomes a problem when it involves, young people who are still developing and are, like, innocent in all of this and are not meant to be involved in all of this. So Kai may have had the concept of having underage relationships normalized to him pretty early on with Greg, and maybe Kai genuinely believes that it's not really a problem. I can kind of see that for somebody who has been emotionally stunted and has never really gotten past that phase to like not understand why there's a big difference between two teenagers dating and a much older adult dating a teenager. But that doesn't make it right, because more than enough people have told them that this is not okay, including their own victims. And if you're not going to listen to the people that you're hurting, and this just keeps happening over and over again, you kind of have to start to be self-aware that maybe the problem is something that you're doing. And that has not happened with them. So whether or not Kai is intentionally malicious or is also, lacking empathy for people kind of is debatable. But what is clear is that Kai is definitely hurting people and should know better, at least to some extent, be questioning this. Now, there's also the mention of them divorcing, which was in all of the meltdown videos, but we all know that those are fake, and it's very likely that they're not actually getting divorced and that was just a ruse to stir up more drama. I mean, it's possible they are, but I really doubt it. Like, if everything else is a lie, like, why would that be the one true thing? So they're not getting divorced, which, if you think about it, is odd, because Kai, at this point, should know very well what Greg is and what Greg is doing. So if Kai doesn't want to divorce Greg, um, the only explanation is that Kai really doesn't care about what's going on, or doesn't think it's objectionable. So what is going on with Kai? Because Kai has clearly gone off of all social media, is taking a hiatus or something, is not addressing any of these claims or allegations or anything that's been coming out. And I think the difference between Kai and Greg is that Kai is a bit smarter, because honestly, I think Greg is kind of stupid. Like, I'm just gonna put this out there. Like, Greg thinks he's the most intelligent, most honest person in the world who knows all the facts, but I think it's very clear that his logic is flawed more often than it's not. Whether it be on purpose or on accident, I just haven't really seen any evidence that Greg is actually that smart. But Kai, on the other hand, is laying low, and that is the smart thing to do in this situation. So it's very likely that Kai is just, removing himself from the situation to try to avoid being blamed for anything, to try to avoid escalating it or drawing attention to himself for anything that he's done, and hoping that it'll all go away and everybody will just kind of forget about him being involved in it. And I don't think that's going to happen, because more and more things have been coming out that are very incriminating. But the smart thing to do in his position is to lay low, is to even pretend that they're not together anymore, pretend that he doesn't approve of what Onision is doing, pretend that he didn't know about it, pretend, these are the things that you do when you're in trouble and you are trying to plead not guilty. You pretend like you didn't know. You pretend like you weren't involved, etc. So I don't buy it, is all I'm trying to say. Like, I don't buy it. I think that Kai knows what's going on, and I don't think Kai is like Greg in the sense that I don't think Kai completely is like a narcissist or a sociopath or anything. I think Kai knows that they can definitely get in trouble, whereas Greg doesn't. Greg doesn't seem to believe that that's a possibility, but Kai probably does know that that's a possibility, and that's why he is being so avoidant of the media and being involved in anything. But it might be too late, because he has already, you know, he has already been caught having sent nudes to minors and soliciting minors for nudes, so there's kind of no getting out of that one. Part of the reason why I don't buy this whole, like, Kai is innocent or Kai is a victim or any of that, which, most of us are not really buying it anymore, is during the interview with Adam. I feel like that one was the most telling of Kai's true colors, essentially, because so many of the things that Kai said to Adam were, like, not only inappropriate, but cruel, like, just heartless and cruel. And, besides even just the gender dysphoria, like, triggering and whatnot, just the making fun of his condition in general, like, in public in front of everybody, like, I can't think of any reason why somebody would think that's okay. And it's something that I really, like, can't look past. Like, I can't forgive someone for that. I can't come up with a reason why they're a victim and it's okay and they're justified in not knowing that that's a cruel and horrible thing to do to somebody. In the same way that, I don't excuse Greg for any of his actions, regardless of the fact that he clearly is mentally ill. Kai has even less of an excuse with that, having graduated college for psychology. There's just no excuse. Like, he would have been told point blank in school what kind of effect these actions can have on people. All this information that I'm talking about is out there, but there are a lot of unanswered questions that are not out there. And I think it's just because Kai is smarter and knows how to hide his tracks a little better than Greg does. But it's very clear that there's something fishy going on between the two of them. I think at this point everybody can see that Kai is not so innocent anymore. Even if these things were normalized to Kai, the fact that he has a degree in psychology to me is the most interesting piece of the puzzle, and I think that's something that should really be focused on in terms of answering the questions of why he's still with Greg, why Greg seemingly deals with him better than other people, and also just drawing attention to the fact that he really does not have an excuse to not know that these things going on are bad. And I hope this kind of sheds light on the reasons why that people can kind of point to when it's brought up, that Kai, this is why Kai should know better. Now, there's still a lot of unanswered questions I think everyone has with Kai, and so this video is not going to be as long as the one on Greg, because Kai just has much less of a paper trail. But I think it's something that is really worth investigating. So I think this is, as a call to action, anything that people can find out about Kai is probably going to be useful in the entire case against Kai and Onision. So, and to repeat what I said earlier, I think it's important to realize that just because someone understands your feelings does not mean that they care. This is a mistake that I've made multiple times in my life of making myself vulnerable to people because they understood me. And they did truly understand me. And because they understood me, they were able to use that against me. And Kai and Onision have done the same thing to countless other victims. So just always remember that just because someone understands you doesn't mean that they have your best interests at heart. So be careful. I don't know how much of it is old news or new news, but that's my thoughts on Kai, and I just think that the more people making videos about Kai, the better. Like, even if people aren't saying anything particularly new or revolutionary, focusing on Kai still helps the public be aware that this is a problem. Keep having a conversation about Kai in any manner possible. Don't let him just slip under the radar. Don't let him slip through the cracks and get away while we all go after Greg, because Greg is just a more obvious problem. So if you agree and you think people should be focusing on Kai as well, please give this video a thumbs up. Please subscribe to my channel if you like to hear me talk about things, because I talk about things a lot. I'm a Gemini, so I ramble on and on forever. And I will see you guys later. Bye!